Okay, last time we left off somewhere like this. I gave you guys a card class and a little factory function that made the cards, put them in the deck. And then I asked you to do something like this. If we have a player who gets 2 cards, we're going to check for pair, straight, and flush. It's only 2, so we don't have to worry about 3 of a kind, full house, or anything else. But we have these guys. And basically this is a exercise to test your use of the attributes of an object. If it's a pair, we need to check the rank. If it's a flush, we need to check the suit, and that kind of thing. Now, where we left off was I said, what if we have 2 players? Just like a real game. It's still 2 cards, so it's simple in that way. But what if we have 2 players and I get a pair and you get nothing, then we want to say I win. Or if you get a flush and I get a straight, we'll say you win. So we're working with the class and its attributes. We probably don't need to change anything about the card, but we could. We probably don't need to change anything about the deck, but we could. It's all about using those guys in a slightly more complicated way. So what we're going to do is think through it. Okay, I'm not just going to like type the right answer and say that's it, because what happens is you type something and you know it's a bit messy, but you keep going and change it and work with what you've got and build from there. Like right now, this part, it worked last time for our purposes, but it's not going to work for what we want now. Because if I check, we'll call this player 1, and I see that he has a flush, well, it's not writing it down anywhere. I need to say, like, hey, player 1 has a flush, so that later when we check player 2, we can compare them. So we need to add something to this or change the way it works to make it fit our purposes. Does that mean it was wrong last time? No, it did the job last time for what we asked for. And now we're going to change it. So how might we do that? The obvious thing is you could just say, let's add another line. Player 1 hand equals pair. I know this sucks, by the way, but sometimes you type stuff that sucks. Now we're doing what we did. It still runs if we hit run, but it has an extra thing that we can use, like, hey, look at that. We got a royal flush or a straight flush in our first try. Now, if we wanted to do the stuff for 2 more cards and then check player 2, and then we could go, if player 2 hand something something, player 1 hand, we could use this. Now, the problem with that is it would involve copying pasting a lot. We would have to say, like, okay, we need to draw more again, print them again probably, do all this again. Imagine that I was going to do that. Control V, and I say, okay, card 3 and card 4, and then I show those. And I know this sucks. Sometimes you type stuff that sucks. Imagine we were going to do that, okay? Don't do this yourself. Save the trouble. But imagine we were going to do that. And then if I hit run, it would probably do what we want. It's going to print 2, tell you what they have. Print 2 more, tell you what they have. We probably need a no pair. Like, we want to say something every time, even if you don't have a hand at all. So it might say no pair, or it might say like king high or whatever. But this is doing it. And now we do have two things that we can work with. We can say something that compares player 1 hand to player 2 hand and give you some winner, right? But this is so ugly and so hard to read. If I'm going to do something with this stuff and then copy it, I can't even put it on the screen at one time. It's all over the place. If I want to change how this works, I have to go back and change the other one and hope that I get it perfectly right. And if I want to do something with the third player, or what if it's a full table with 9 or 10, and I end up copying this all and making 50 lines, that's no good. That's no good. So it's nice to copy stuff, type stuff, give it a shot. Now that I've hit run, I know that this does pretty much work. But I do not want to keep it that way and say, I'm done. I want to delete all that, because what I'd rather have is something more reusable. I want to have a chunk. There's some sound coming from the hallway. I don't know what that was. I want to have a chunk of code that I reuse for player 1, and I reuse for player 2, and I reuse later if we have 3, 4, 5, blah, blah, blah. So let's take all this stuff and put it in a separate spot. What do we call that when we take a little piece, give it a name, and call it up later? Call that a function. So I'm going to call it check hand. I don't know. And then I'm not going to say card 1 or card 2, because right now that's repeating what these are called. And I want to emphasize that this is for any cards in any situation, right? I'm going to call it card and other because, I don't know, seems right to me in the moment. So now I'm going to change this to say card and other. And this works for anybody who sends any 2 cards, which means we don't want to use player 1, because this might not be player 1. This might be used for player 20 or something else we call them later. So I'm going to change this to return. It's going to spit out the string of whatever type it is. Okay? Like, I'm going to ask this function, hey, I'm going to send you 2 cards and you're going to tell me what relationship they have. And that means I'm not going to print inside of here. That's not the responsibility of this function. This function is only going to tell me what the hand is. I'll print it later. And as I said a minute ago, you want to have the else, right? Like the final thing. What if none of the other guys trigger? You want to have a final one. So I'm going to put this at the end. I don't actually need to say else, because if we get to this line, that means the other one's already happened and didn't trigger. So I'm going to say no pair. That's usually what you call it in poker if somebody has nothing, unless you give them a specific, like, oh, you have ace high or you have jack high or something. We can get to that later with our tiebreaker stuff. But I'm going to say check hand with this function being able to check any hand in the 2-card poker game we're talking about. And it's going to have a reusable aspect. So if I have player 1, I'll send its cards to this guy. And if I have player 2, I'll send its cards to this guy. and it'll still work. It doesn't care what their name is or where they came from or who they're attached to. It just says, hey, you're going to give me 2 cards and I'm going to tell you what they have. So now, down here, I can say something like player 1 hand equals check hand card 1, card 2. Now that's still ugly. I don't really like giving them names like this because if I look at this name, it's not telling me who it belongs to. And if I look at the player 1 hand, I don't know if that means is it the cards or the score of the cards or the rank of the, you know. But it's something. It's a good start. And it also means I can do this with the next person. Player 2 hand equals check hand with whatever we call it, you know, even if we call it card 3 and card 4, which sucks. At least we're getting somewhere. So maybe we'll do that. Again, this is not amazing. But you can type stuff that's not amazing and then improve it in a minute. Let's go ahead and print these guys. So as you can see, we're doing a lot of repeating. We can spin these off into their own little things. But right now the main function is kind of nice because it's a table of contents. It's saying what kinds of things happen, but it's not really doing the work. It's saying, okay, there's a function for making the deck. Go ahead and do that. There's a function for checking the hands. Go ahead and do that. But it's not like owning all the responsibility for all these different things. It's just putting it together. Probably moving in the right direction. And then remember, we're not printing it in here, so let's print the stuff. Let's say print player 1 hand and print player 2 hand. And actually we got to say what they are, because if it just mentions flush, we're not going to know who's getting the flush or whatever. So I'm going to do the little F string guy and then do the same over here. Yeah, that seems reasonable. Now let's hit run and see what happens. That looks silly when it says a no pair, but otherwise it's not bad. And is it logically making sense? Yeah, that really is a flush. Yeah, that really is a straight. Okay, so it's not, it hasn't lost its mojo of these checks actually being right. So now we need to think about the comparison. If you have a flush and the other person has a pair, who wins? If you have a pair and the other person has nothing, who wins, right? We want to actually do something with these results. And we're slightly set up for that. It's not amazing. We can definitely go back and improve this. But we've got something that's better than we had a minute ago. And we're going to, along the way, just scoot ourselves in the right direction and make it so that each thing is handling its business a little bit. It's not like getting all tangled up. Right now, if I want to change the check hand, I can do it, and it doesn't mess with everything else. If I want to change like how the cards work, I can pretty much do that. So let's say I don't even know what it's going to be, but I want to make a function called compare hands. And I'm going to send it the 2 hands. Okay. I do not want a big chunk inside the main that has like if this, but not this, and elif this, and I don't want to have all that. I just want to say, hey, let me send you two things, and you send me back an answer of who wins. Okay. And obviously the hard part is going to be the tiebreaker, where it's like, oh, you have a flush, but it's ace-king, and you have a flush, but it's ace-7. That's hard. We'll skip that for now. We'll do the easy stuff and figure that out in a separate step. But let's say, all right, compare hands. And remember, I'm not doing this for right now. I'm doing this for the future. So I'm not going to say player 1 and player 2, because later we might want to compare player 3 and player 7, or player 1 and a thing from the past, you know? So I'm not going to say whatever with some numbers. I'm going to call it hand and other, because these are just two hands, you know? If I end up changing this, I don't have to worry about it being attached to one specific name or one specific player or whatever. I can just say, hey, it's going to get two hands, and it's going to tell you something. So what do we got? We got 4 possibilities, excluding the tiebreaker. But we got 4 possibilities, which is you can have a flush or a straight or a pair or nothing. And if you imagine all the combos, that's 16 combos, because it could be flush and straight, flush and pair, etc., etc. I do not want to write 16 different
if you
ifs.
set a value for each one, and it says like, let's say the higher it is, the higher win rate it is. So if you like a flush, which I'm guessing higher is higher than a straight, but it has like a 2, then flush is a 1.
Exactly. I don't know if you hear that on the microphone, but someone suggested that we give them a score, and it's like, oh, flush is 3 and a straight is 2 or whatever. And then we see who has a higher number, which is narrowing it down quite a bit. We don't have to do 16 combos. And this is really going to help us in the future, because once we have more possibilities like 2 pair, 3 of a kind, full house, those combos would explode even more. And if, I mean, you can write if all day long, but that's no fun. You want to make the computer do the work and not yourself do the work. So we could have some kind of score where they get points, or at least they get put in order. And we've got a couple types that can do that. We could put them in a list. We could put them in a tuple. We could put them in a dictionary, right? And I would say that ranking, or whatever we want to call it, might live in this function, or it might live outside the function if we want to think about using it elsewhere. Let's just type it here for now, and then we'll move it if we think better of that. So let's call this, I don't know, hands, hand rankings. I'm going to just say hands, but we might change our minds if we think that's not descriptive enough. Hands, it goes no pair, pair, straight, flush. This is a tuple because it's not going to change. It's not like halfway through the game we get new rules, right? It could be a list and work the same, or it could be a dictionary, and it might be slightly easier to look up. However, the thing with the tuple that's nice is that they're already indexed, right? I don't have to give it a number. I don't have to say like straight is 2 or pair is 1. Is that they already have an index. And I am thinking ahead to when we add more cards and more hands where it's 2 pair, 3 of a kind, etc. And it would be so easy to just dump them in here and move on. And then we don't have to update the numbers and say like, oh, this was 2, but now it's 3, and this was 4, but now it's 5, or whatever. So don't worry about, is this perfect? No, but none of this is perfect. We're just going to type something, go with it, and then go back and change it later. You always want to have a balance of sometimes thinking ahead, making things easier on your future self. Of course, that's good, but you don't want to become paralyzed and say, well, I can't do anything because I'm worried that it might introduce inefficiencies 2 weeks from now. So let's say something like 3 possibilities. Instead of 16, now we only have 3. One guy's higher, the other guy's higher, or they're even, right? That's fine. I don't mind writing 3 ifs. I would definitely mind writing 16. So I can say if one guy wins, if the other guy wins, else they're even, right? So how are we going to do that? I don't know. Let's see here. What we're going to do, and this is kind of backwards feeling compared to if I had done a dictionary, but what we want to do is look up where it is in hands. So I want to say hands dot, I think you could use find, or I think you could use index. I don't remember which is different, but I think they both kind of do the same thing.
What does index do?
It looks for this guy in here and gives you back 0, 1, 2, 3. And like I said, that feels a little backwards. I'm already regretting my decision, but it does do the job, I think. Then do something. I don't know what I'm going to type there, but I do know that this is going to be copied, and you switch the little guy, and this is going to be something else. Okay, I'm going to hit run, even though nothing's going to appear. I just want to test and see if there are errors or something. Because you usually want to hit run more often than this, and I've been typing a while without it, especially because I'm talking so much. I forgot when the last time I hit run. So let's see what happens. Okay, hey, look at that. We got an error because I forgot the colon. Okay, so now it is running, and all this is correct. It's not pretty, but it is like correctly determining when it has a flush or a straight or whatever. And now we need to do something in here to test the winner. So even though this is not correct, I'm going to say player 1 and player 2. We want to make this function more generalized, more abstract, that it could work for any players. But just to test it out in the next 30 seconds, I'm going to say this. Okay. So, okay. A lot of ties. We definitely need the tiebreaker because ties are so common. It's probably like a quarter of the time or something, or maybe even more. Okay, this is making sense though. It is like logically doing what I think it's doing. So now we want to get out the specifics. I don't want this to say player 1 wins because it might not be player 1. We're comparing any 2 hands, not these guys in this moment. So probably it shouldn't print at all. We should have it return something and then use that, because this is already taking on multiple responsibilities, like, hey, you're holding the hand ranks and checking them and printing stuff. It's a little much for one function. So what might we do? We might return something. And how is it going to know what to return? Well, it could get the names in the parameters. We could tell it like, oh, this guy's named player 1 and this guy's named player 2, and you're going to tell me which one of those wins. I don't love that. That seems too complicated. It could return a number, just like 1 or 2 or something. Or it could return, this would be the easy way, it could just return the hand, like flush versus no pair, flush wins. Right, that's the easy way. And obviously that isn't going to work in the long term when we have tiebreakers and stuff. But that might be something. Let's end this here because this video is getting long. But that would be my next step, is to sort of step back a level. Sometimes in my mind I call that generalizing. Usually in computer science they call it abstraction, where instead of doing a specific thing, you do a thing that applies to whoever's using this function, whoever's supplying the contents, like going from print hello world to print message, and then message can be whatever. There you go. Thanks.